saying. So I kept up with the news, of course, as you do, trying to keep the story current. And by the time it hit 2004, 2005, of course, it had gone through another iteration entirely, and it went through 40 rejections, and finally Post Road rejected it and said, "Boy, nice story," and but we just can't do it. And then 2 months after that, the editor mailed me back and said, "I can't stop thinking about it. Do you still have that story?" So I'm happy, of course, that they published it at Post Road, and it's probably, well, you see the title of the book is Mostly Redneck, and I think of myself as mostly redneck, but this story has a redneck in it, but it's not really about that. It's called O Saddam, and if you ever wondered what happened to Saddam between the Gulf Wars and why it took us so long to catch him, this story will answer that for you. Saddam Hussein was a street-side seller of hot nuts near Faneuil Hall. He worked undercover there during the last Gulf War until just after it, as the U.S. slagged the Iraqis. If only they knew, while they video bombed his underground bunkers and chased his doubles, that Saddam spent his mornings selling cashews and pistachios in the cradle of the revolution with that magnificent smile of his. I knew, though, which made me feel not quite superior, but knowledgeable in a way that others weren't. My place in this hidden history, at least, would be certain. I would be celebrated in notebooks, but he, his corn-pink pistachio fingers fondling obscenely patriotic balloons, would be celebrated as the butcher of curds, the burner of oil, terrorist harboring scourge, and love of my life. I was a historic Boston tour guide, and he and I met clandestinely in the basement showers of the New England Homeless Veterans Shelter. Our throats caught tight in terror. We crawled through the open windows and tried not to laugh at the oddness of knowing we were simply, right now, supposed to be doing just this. Saddam would gently bathe me every other midday, scrubbing me with a Bed Bath & Beyond loofah bought by me at half price. And then I spent my work days orating lustily for the folks in the back of the crowd who perspired in the close green shadows of the public garden statue memorializing ether. I spoke of things ages past: revolution, Paul Revere, sheep and cows grazing the common, abolition, and make way for ducklings, and things of otherwise no concern, while my mind was under the light sprinkle of the showerhead with my one true love, while with one hand I fended off the ass grabs of Drakkar-smelling, paunchy men with fanny packs who wanted a vacation delight with a girl guide, as most of them called me. I felt badly for their wives, worse for the children, and tired of all of their chatter. I made up stories sometimes. How Paul Revere was a closeted homosexual, how Peter Faneuil dealt slaves, how the Tea Party was really just the equivalent of a frat party. I would go off alone with their husbands just off to the side, maybe behind a sweatshirt selling vendor under pretext of finding Freedom Trail pamphlets and pointing out landmarks. Sometimes I would slip my hand into their shirts and rub their hairy bellies seductively, which was what they wanted, a story to tell the boys back home, and I was bored by them too. I took that job for something to do, more or less a hedge should I decide to commit my life to junior proms and football games. It was a grim joke of sorts that I would spend my time during the summer months catering to smiling and nodding Chinese tourists and their notions of what made America the place to visit. I fit that postcard picture the tourists demanded. The television loved me. The announcers fawned over my blonde hair and quiet beauty. I even made the front page of the Boston Globe once, in color, and they even remembered to whiten my teeth. I suspected my behind was smaller too. They'd caught me bending over a bed of freesia and some other plant I didn't recognize, showing something to some child. Historic Boston loved people like me, school teachers whose tenure depended on community service and an impeccable moral record, the better for forcing that imprimatur on the rich and scornful youth of the Dover-Sherburne School District. I'll review the school district for just a second. Here comes the redneck, by the way. My father had called me a few weeks before summer vacation began, before I met Saddam. I was in the midst of next fall's lesson plans, and he was in the last thrashes of his Sturm-und-Drang marriage to my second stepmom, Rosie. My father was a plumber who lived in Exeter, New Hampshire. He belonged to a militia and had given me a Smith & Wesson 357 Magnum for my 25th birthday. It had a 2.1-inch barrel and a concealed hammer, so it wouldn't hang on my clothes or purse when I needed it. I left it in my nightstand next to the Cyclophyr, Xanax, Effexor, and MDMA. Also Klonopin. I wanted no surprises anymore. I wanted always to be prepared. "It's me, baby. Did you see the Channel 44 news?" His voice always took on a somber tone, and I knew his biorhythm was at a low, which meant I might get a visit any time of the day or night, my poor dad mumbling to himself about the world's woes. I braced myself. "No, Pop. The last time he called, I'd had to talk him off the roof, almost literally. Rosie had dumped him drunk on the steps of the Oddfellows meeting hall, and his neighbor, Militia Captain Mitch Morton, had found him there shivering in his shirt sleeves. Rosie had gone to the casino with her lady friends, she said. Pop had his doubts. I didn't care, though I felt badly for him, and Mitch just puffed his pipe and winked at me before he got into his truck and took off. I'd had to drive up to New Hampshire in the dead of night to keep him calm until Rosie came back. He told me, "Oh God, Danny, I can't live without that bitch, but I'm through now, by Christ, I swear." His pledge to leave her was done in by the 26th grade she brought back with her. His voice brought me back. "I saw there was another subway assault. You got your little buddy with you?" "Always, Dad. I'm working for the Park Service." As I held the phone on my shoulder, I leafed through my papers, and there was little Jimmy King's paper discussing the causes of the Civil War at the back of the grade book. I wondered where that had gotten to. He sighed. "I taught you better than that. It's bad enough that you work for a public school. It's all about the dollar, Pop. I need the extra money." I also found the love letter Jimmy had been passing to his lady love, Sapphire. Why had I kept them? "Look, I can give you a few ideas. You should move up here and barter those teacher skills. Learn to sew, by God. No more of this Zionist occupation government." He spent all his money on munitions, on weapons he could pay someone to convert to full auto for the coming apocalypse. He'd gone full gamut since I'd been born, from refusing to pay anyone for anything he couldn't learn to do himself, to learning to repair transmissions and raising rabbits, for his eventual move to Alaska, and to safely stockpile TNT and blasting caps in sealed 55-gallon drums for the inevitable mud people takeover, as he referred to it. "I'm fine, Pop, really." "Okay. Clip me the news out of the newspaper, would you, and send it up." Pop didn't believe anything until he saw it himself. He watched the weather and the news on 3 different television sets, set to different channels, and asked me to send him the print sources afterwards. I'd stopped asking questions. It was more than mistrust for him. It was absolute inability to believe in any wound he had not thrust his own fingers into. The problem now was that the whole carcass had been bled nearly dry, and my father believed that he and Mitch were the bandages that would stop the flow. Saddam caught my eye the first time I passed by the red Auerbach statue near Faneuil Hall. He was on his way back to his cart from wherever he'd found a parking spot in the midst of the disemboweled downtown Boston, his white apron dark at the front and that dark curly hair springing forth from under his black beret. That toothy smile, the thick mustache. I didn't see how people weren't recognizing him for who he was. I left my tour group in the Disney store and followed him across the street and up the stairs, where protesters, some of them my rich kid students I'm sure, in town on a lark with their fish t-shirts and their mother's Lexuses, lined up with placards and cigarettes and tried to look serious as their mates set up a mic and PA system. His cart was immaculate. The bottles of water arranged just so, his grill clean, umbrella new. He handed balloons to every child, inflated from the CO2 tank. Pretty girls and women too. I couldn't keep my eyes off him. Nor could I understand why people didn't see what I saw. Here he was! No wonder he couldn't be found. No wonder all the TV generals looked so serious. No wonder the president seemed so intent. No wonder. I took to watching him from afar. Policemen bought packets of almonds and he nodded at them. Always a smile, always something set aside that caused a laugh. I thought about walking up to City Hall, telling someone, anyone, but who would believe such a ridiculous story? When it rained and the tourists went to hide at the aquarium and in restaurants and under the awnings of the awful duck tour, failing to notice the sublime irony of the military machine used for tourist profit, I stood wet and miserable under the shadow of the massive granite bank on School Street, smoking, even though I wasn't supposed to in uniform, and waiting for my shift relief to show up. He came up then and spoke. "Your beauty is to me like those Nicene barks of yore." His English was almost accentless, but just oddly phrased enough for mystery. "Excuse me?" I cursed myself. I hadn't prepared for this today. Other days I planned for lovers and chance meetings, but not now, especially ones who sounded like poets. "You're beautiful. I would like for you to coffee with me." Those bruised eyes, heavy with sorrow and knowledge and beauty, who could resist? Then my cell phone beeped, and I excused myself and turned away slightly. "It's near time, Danny," the voice said. "Pop," I said. Saddam thrust his hands into his pockets and stepped away, his chest hair curled up from his shirt neck. "I got some Cypro if you need it. It's time, Danny. It's past goddamn time." I could hear the fever pitch in his voice rising. "Come up here. You can bunker down with Rosie and me. We can't let them take this country away from us. This president, his Middle Eastern monkey business, it's just oil and a small man getting stomped. By now you must see, honey." "God, not now. I'm busy." "You're working in this downpour?" There's his interminable weather channel watching again. "I'm about to have coffee with a man." I smiled at Saddam, whose face brightened. He gestured toward the Starbucks and tilted his head quizzically, and I fell instantly, madly into a completely cliche love.